Welcome, ladies, to the second lesson of the Rosh Chodesh Society, the series It's About Time. So we are now in the Hebrew month of Tevet, and as we mentioned last class, the way this series works is we are associating a human experience, a characteristic, or an emotion with every Jewish month of the year. So last month was Kislev, and we spoke about sleep. This month, Tevet, is associated in the book Sefer Yetzirah, Kabbalistic book. Sefer Yetzirah is associated with the very human characteristic of anger. Sarah, feel free to pull up a chair, make yourself comfortable. Sorry?
Yetzirah.
Sefer Yetzirah. The book of formation in English. So what we will discuss today, the class is titled Emotional Mastery. We will discuss how to manage anger, something that I think is relevant to every human being. So Edna and Sam were married for a good 60 years. And ever since Edna was a newlywed, she had this box on her closet shelf. And it was kind of like a secret box, because right after their marriage, she told Sam, in no uncertain terms, Sam, you are never to take down this box, and you are never to examine the contents of this box. And Sam respected that. He was somewhat curious, but he respected her wishes, and as the years went by, he actually pretty much forgot about this box that remained sitting in Edna's closet. Well, 60 years later, they're both getting old, Edna's not so well, and Sam is beginning to put their affairs in order. And as he's looking through papers, he comes across this box. And he remembers, oh, this is Edna's secret box. But he thinks maybe now it's time to take a look. Edna's not well. Maybe there's something important, some information that they need at this time in their lives. So he takes down the box, looks inside. What does he find? He finds 2 handkerchiefs and $82,000. He has no idea what this is supposed to mean. Where did all that money come from? So he went to ask Edna about it. And he said, listen, Edna, I confess, I looked in your secret box. I really couldn't help myself anymore. I'm sorry, but I must ask you, what is the meaning of the contents of that box? What are those 2 handkerchiefs, and what is all that money? $82,000. So Edna said, well, Sam, when I got married, my mother gave me a marriage tip. She told me that any time I get frustrated with you, or I get upset, I should let out my frustration by making a handkerchief.
What is it? Sorry, I don't know
A
what
handkerchief?
it means in English yet.
A handkerchief, anyone knows it? Thank you.
Thanks.
So she said, and that's exactly what I did. Every time I got upset with you, Sam, I made a handkerchief, and I put it in the box. So Sam is so touched. She said, wow, and I can't believe it. In all our 60 years of marriage, you were only upset at me twice? But what about the money? So Edna says, no, Sam. The $82,000 is the money I made from selling all the handkerchiefs that I made. These are the only 2 that are left. So, talking about anger management, I guess Edna had a good technique. But the point is, we all experience anger. It's a very human emotion. And what we want to try to discover today through the class is how to manage it. Some techniques, some tools that the Torah has for us. There's a legend about Maimonides, otherwise known as the Rambam, Rosh ben Maimon. He's a 12th century scholar. And the Rambam was a prominent doctor, and in fact, he was a doctor for the Sultan. He worked in the Sultan's palace. And there was a debate at the time between the Rambam and various advisors of the Sultan whether an animal's instinct or base nature can be refined to the point of an animal actually able to behave kind of like a human. And the advisors were certain that could be done. Whereas the Rambam disagreed. He said, an animal's an animal. You cannot really train an animal to change and become human-like. So the advisor said, no, we'll prove it to you. So they came up with a plan. They decided they were going to take a bunch of cats and train these cats to be waiters. And they're going to plan this big feast, and they're going to invite the Rambam, and they're going to show the Rambam that these cats can be gracious hosts. They can be waiters dressed appropriately, walking on two legs, carrying platters, and serving the guests graciously. That's exactly what happened. The advisors worked very hard. They trained these cats, and the day of this banquet arrived. And they, of course, invited the Rambam. So the Rambam walks in. He sees the cats on two legs, walking around, holding platters, serving. Okay, he sits down. And suddenly, he pulls out a mouse from his pocket and throws it on the ground, lets it loose. And what happened? Suddenly, crash, all the platters came falling down. The cats left their posts, forget about the gracious serving and the elegant waiters. They were all back to their nature, scampering, fighting over this mouse that was loose in the room. And I think the Rambam proved his point. Now, we all have our own mice. We all have our triggers that cause us to leave our rationality behind and cause us to act on impulse without thinking very much first. And there's a very good reason for this. If you take a look in your textbook, page 50, text number 1, we have a quote here from a Kabbalistic work called the Eitz Chaim by Rabbi Chaim Vital, who recorded the teachings of the Arizal, famous Kabbalist. And what does he say there? He says the human being is primarily comprised of the impulsive drive and the trait of rationality. In other words, the human being is a dichotomy. On one hand, we're animalistic. We have base urges, we have instincts, we have impulses. We have a part to us that doesn't think, that just reacts in a knee-jerking response. But on the other hand, we have human rationality. We have the ability to think before we act. And what's supposed to happen, what we hope will happen, is as a human being grows up and matures, we learn to control the animal part of our nature. We learn to keep it in check and to resist those urges and to think first and have our reactions based on rationality as opposed to impulsivity. Which is why you see children have a very hard time with that. The younger the person, the more that person acts out of impulse. The older person gets, the more we mature, the more we have that ability to tap into the rational side of our natures. As we see in text 2, on the same page.
What page is that?
Page 50.
50?
50.
It's not the same.
I think it's 33.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. You are right. I have the teacher's manual, and the pages must be different. That makes sense.
Yeah,
I'm
because
sorry.
yeah.
Okay, so what page is it in the student one?
33.
33. Thank you.
I see it's on.
Okay, and here we have an excerpt from the book of Tanya. It's the basic book, the foundation of Chabad Hasidic philosophy, written by Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. And here, the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman, he elaborates on this idea of being this dichotomy of animal impulses versus human rationality. And the Alter Rebbe explains how we work with the two. The mind rules over impulse by virtue of a human's inborn nature. Employing the mind's power of will, people can restrain themselves and control their emotional drives, preventing the heart's desires from manifesting in action, word, and thought. In other words, yes, we have animal instincts, but we're also created to control those animal instincts. And the distinction between a human and an animal is so apparent that it's interesting. We see it even in the way an animal is built physically and a human is built physically. An animal walks on all fours, which means the head and the heart of an animal are in line. They're on the same page. Meaning, an animal's all about the heart, about the emotions, about the instinct. Whereas a human walks upright. So we have the head above the heart, which is the concept of our mind, our rationality, controlling, being in the lead, controlling our heart, controlling our emotions, controlling our instinct. And that's a goal that we're constantly striving to work towards, to have our mind above our heart. Now, it's interesting that contemporary neuroscience really supports this. According to studies, recent studies, this dichotomy is found also in the human brain. There's a part of the brain that controls instinct and a part of the brain that controls rational thought. Which brings us to text 3 in your book. So I guess that's 32?
34.
34? Okay. Would anyone like to read that? Any volunteers?
Okay, I'll read
Raise it. Thank you.
my reading. All right. Emotions more or less begin inside two almond-shaped structures in our brains, which are called the amygdala. The amygdala is the part of the brain responsible for identifying threats to our well-being and for sending out an alarm when threats are identified that results in us taking steps to protect ourselves. The amygdala is so efficient at warning us about threats that it gets us reacting before the cortex, the part of the brain responsible for thought and judgment, is able to check on the reasonables of our reactions. In other words, our brains are wired in such a way as to influence us to act before we can properly consider the consequences of our actions. This is not an excuse for behaving badly. People can and do control their aggressive impulses. The prefrontal cortex of your brain, which is located just behind your forehead, can keep your emotions in proportions. If the amygdala handles emotion, the prefrontal cortex handles judgment. The left prefrontal cortex can switch off your emotions. It serves an executive role to keep things under control.
Okay. Thank you, Isa. So we see why it's so hard to control our spontaneous reactions to events. We're kind of wired that way. Yet, as Harry Mills puts it here, it's not an excuse because we have another part of our brain that controls how we could react to something. So does this mean that instinct is wrong? Does instinct also serve a purpose, or is it just there to be controlled by our intellect?
Survival, no?
Mm-hmm. Right, as we read here, the amygdala is responsible for identifying threats, which is very, very important, obviously, for our survival. And in fact, there's a documented case of a race car driver who suddenly, before turning a hairpin turn, he suddenly braked. He didn't really know why. He just had this impulse to brake. And that saved him from colliding with a whole pile up of cars. There's an accident that took place just at the other side of the turn. If he hadn't braked, he probably would have lost his life. And after this almost accident, this race car driver was reviewing the video footage that was taken of that moment and trying to figure out what prompted him to brake. And after reviewing it a few times, he realized that as he was turning the corner, the crowd was not looking at him. They were looking off to the side with this shocked expressions on their faces. And subconsciously, that made him realize that something was wrong, because ordinarily they should have been looking at him. He's the racer, he's coming through. And the fact that something was off, that instinct kicked in, and he realized subconsciously, this is all subconsciously, that he should brake, and that actually saved his life. So yes, Gabi, like you said, instinct is necessary for survival. But like anything, we have to make sure that it doesn't get out of control. There's something in psychological lingo called a hijack. And that is when the amygdala gets out of control. That it's causing us to have all these spontaneous reactions when those reactions should have been controlled. So yes, instinct's good, but we have to be aware of our instincts and not allow them to get hijacked, not allow them to take over our lives, specifically when it comes to reactions of anger. So So let us take a look at the Torah's perspective on anger, and from there we will go on to getting some tools for dealing with things. So if we take a look at text 5a, we have a quote from the Bible, from the book of Kohelet. Be not hasty with your spirit to become wrathful, for wrath lies in the bosom of fools. So it's not that harsh, it will get harsher, but so far Kohelet tells us that anger is for fools. It's not smart, not recommended. From there we move on to the Talmud. What does the Talmud tell us about anger? An angry person is left with nothing but anger. In other words, not worth it. You're not going to gain anything. It's not very positive, it's not very productive. From there we move on to Mishnah Torah. We mentioned Maimonides before. Mishnah Torah is a book authored by Maimonides, and he has a lot to say there about anger. Anger is an exceptionally negative trait. It is appropriate to distance oneself from it to the furthest extreme. A person should train oneself not to become angry, even when anger seems appropriate. Our sages said regarding anger that it strips wisdom from the wise and prophecy from the prophet, and the life of the irate is not considered life at all. The sages therefore taught that one should train oneself to keep away from anger to the point of not reacting, even to a situation that would normally provoke anger. This is the finest approach. In other words, there is no worth in anger whatsoever, according to Maimonides. Just stay away from it. Don't even react. And finally, we have the text 5d from a contemporary Jewish scholar, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, chief rabbi of the United Kingdom. And he has a good line there. He says, either we defeat anger, or anger will defeat us. There's a beautiful metaphor
Sorry,
told.
can you repeat it, please?
Either we defeat anger, or anger will defeat
yeah.
us.
Thanks.
You know, it's easy to live a life determined and run by anger, which is obviously not healthy. So there's a beautiful metaphor to show us just what the power of anger is and where it could lead. There was a little boy named Yosef who had a temper. It didn't take much to set him off. Frustration at trying to get a certain toy working a certain way, or his teacher not allowing him to break one of the rules that he didn't feel like following, or his mother telling him he can't have an extra cookie, or whatever it is. It would set him off. He would just get so angry, and didn't always have good results. So finally one day his father called him over, decided he's going to take care of this once and for all. And this might not have been the technique his mother would have chosen, but his father told him the following. He said, listen, Yosef, every time you get angry, here's a box of nails. Take one of these nails and hammer it into our garden fence. So that's what he did. The next time he lost his temper, he took a nail and he hammered it into his garden fence. And it wasn't such easy work. He was a little boy. It was a thick fence. And so as time went on, he started working a little bit harder at controlling his temper, because it was really a big job for him to hammer in these nails every time he lost his temper. Until the day came when he didn't even have to hammer in one nail. So his father called him aside again and said, Yosef, I'm proud of you. I noticed that today you didn't even have to hammer in a single nail. You really controlled your temper today. So from now on, we are going to do the reverse. Every time you feel like getting angry and you're able to control yourself, you're going to go outside and you're going to pull out one of those nails that you had hammered into the fence. And that's what happened. Now that he has a handle on his temper, it didn't take long until all the nails were pulled out. And Yosef is so proud of himself. He really conquered this problem that he had. He's able to conquer his temper. And he ran to his father and he said, Dad, I got all the nails out. There's not one nail left in the fence. I did it. His father's so proud of him. He tells him he's proud of his accomplishments. But he says, but Yosef, I want to show you something. Come outside to the fence. He said, it's true, there's no more nails here. But you see what there is on this fence? There's a lot of holes. He said, yes, you conquered your anger, and that's an amazing thing. But anger has effects that can never be undone. Yes, you might apologize to the person that you hurt in your anger. Yes, you might be able to reverse the consequence. You broke something, you could fix it. Possibly. But there will always be a scar left from your anger. And they can never, ever be taken away. So anger is not to be taken lightly. So how do we deal with it? How do we manage our anger? What are some tools that we can take advantage of? So let's move on to a biblical paradigm. An example from our Tanakh, from our Bible. King David was first anointed as king of Israel in secret by the prophet Samuel when the previous king, King Saul, was still reigning. After King Saul's death, King David's coronation was made public, and the members of his tribe, he was from the tribe of Judah, out of the 12 tribes, he was a member of the tribe of Judah, the members of his tribe made a ceremony and they publicly anointed him as king. But it wasn't so smooth. There was a little bit of a problem because there were still those who were loyal to King Saul. And King Saul was from a different tribe. He was from the tribe of Benjamin. And King Saul had left an heir. His name was Ish-Bosheth. And there were those that felt that the dynasty should continue through, I think it was his grandson, Ish-Bosheth. And so what happened? There was a civil war. Avner, he was King Saul's general. He led the team that was for perpetuating King Saul's legacy. And Yoav, he was King David's general, and he led the side for King David. And it was a battle. I'm not going to go into all the details of the civil war. Eventually, though, Avner, the general of King Saul's army, realized that King David was successful. King David was the rightful successor to the throne, and he did come onto the side of King David. What followed next was a series of two specific events of treachery. Avner was assassinated by King David's general, who still was very, very loyal to King David, and so still had issues with Avner, who wasn't as loyal in the beginning. And then a second assassination took place, the assassination of King Saul's grandson, Ish-Bosheth. And King David took those two events very, very much to heart. He came out very strongly against his men for having done that. And he cried bitterly at the funeral of Avner and the funeral of Ish-Bosheth, and he strongly condemned those actions, even though they were done out of loyalty to him, because his men were so loyal to him. Nonetheless, he strongly condemned those actions. And at that point, the tension between the house of Saul and the house of David calmed down. And all of Israel accepted King David's reign. But it didn't last long. A new problem cropped up. King David had a son named Avshalom, who was very spoiled. And he decided he was going to dethrone his father. He wanted to be king. And the dynasty of the kingship was not going to pass to him. It was going to pass to another son, King Solomon. But Avshalom really wanted to take the throne. And so instead of fighting with his son, King David had no interest in getting into another civil war, this time with his own child. He went into voluntary exile with a bunch of his loyal followers. And as King David was on his way to exile, he meets up with a man named Shimi ben Gera. Shimi ben Gera was a relative of King Saul. Shimi ben Gera took one look at King David, humbly going into exile, leaving the throne, and he was gleeful. He was so happy in the downfall of King David. Not only was he happy to see King David being in this position that he was in, he began to curse David. And he blamed him for the assassination of Avner and the assassination of Ish-Bosheth, and cursed him and yelled at him and insulted him. And what do you think King David's reaction was?
Blessing him.
Let's take a look. Text 6. What page is that in the student text?
38.
38. Anyone want to read? Any volunteers? I don't mind reading, you just might get tired of my voice. Does someone volunteer? Nat? Okay, thank you, Natalie.
When King David came to Bahurim, behold, there came out from there a man of the family of the house of Saul, whose name was Shimi, the son of Gera. He came out and kept on cursing as he came. He cast stones at David and at all the king's servants, And all the people and all the mighty men were on his right hand and on his left. So said Shimi in his curse, go away, you man of blood and wicked fellow. The Lord has returned upon you all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose stead you have reigned. And the Lord has given the kingdom into the hands of Absalom, your son, and behold, you are taken by your own evil, for you are a man of blood.
So, what do you think? Did King David have a right to defend himself? To explain himself? First of all, Shimi ben Gera was getting King David when King David was down. That's a number one no-no. You don't get someone when they're already down. It's not fair. Look, he was on his way to exile. He was no longer the king. It's not the time to put someone down, even if they deserve it. But not only that, it was totally unjustified. David didn't assassinate Avner or Ishbosheth. On the contrary, King David always went out of his way to make peace at the house of Saul. Always. And he was brokenhearted over their assassinations. And he condemned his own men who carried those assassinations out, even though it was out of loyalty to him. He never, ever put his own men before taking care and dealing with the assassinations in the way they should be taken care of. He was always putting himself out for the enemy, so to speak. And not only that, but who is Shimi ben Gera? He's not a ruffian. He's not a lowlife that has nothing better to do than go cursing people out. He was actually a very prominent figure. He was a member of the Sanhedrin, the Jewish courts. He belonged to a royal family. He was a member of King Saul's household. It wasn't just anybody. So curses and insults coming from such a prominent person must hurt even more. If it's just, someone who always curses, he always curses, and you kind of, you make exceptions and you move on with your life. It's not the biggest deal. But someone prominent, someone important, someone who's looked up to, like Shimi ben Gera, King David must have been very, very hurt. Yet what was his reaction? Let him curse. Must be a message for me implied in this. And taking a deeper look, King David's reaction really provides some important tools, some important techniques in anger management for us as well. So the Torah is not just a story, it's not just a history book. It's a guidebook, it's a manual for life. And anything we need to know in our life, if you look in the Torah, it's there. And this story of King David with Shimi ben Gera is an excellent, excellent example for how to deal with anger.
Because it's like if you answer to these people, you become like part of this anger too. Exactly. So it's better.
Exactly. And we will discuss that further, what exactly you're doing when you get angry at somebody.
We're saying it now, Amida.
Right. And I would love to hear your insight about
You know that.
So
We're
let's
saying
discuss it
it to
after the
them,
class so we could get through the material, and then I'd love to hear your insight about that. Okay? So we could break down anger management, the techniques we're going to learn from the Torah, we could break that down into 3 steps. Number 1, restraint. Number 2, consider another perspective. And number 3, seek purpose and opportunity. So let's begin with restraint. So restraint is only step 1, because restraint doesn't deal with the anger itself. You're not trying to not get angry in the first place. Yes, you're angry, human after all. We do get angry, and we can't not get angry right now. It already happened. But at least I can try to restrain myself. In other words, I can try to control my reaction. I'm angry, but I'm not going to react right now. I will wait till I'm calm. I will hold myself back at the moment. Because of course, reacting in the heat of the moment, probably going to regret it later on. Whereas if you give yourself a pause, you could think, use the rational part of your brain, you'll have a much better response to the situation. So that's the first technique, is restraint. And we have a line from Mishnah Avot, about restraint. Who is mighty? He who overcomes his impulse. As it is stated in Mishlei, in Proverbs, book of Proverbs, better is one who is slow to anger than a mighty person, and one who controls his spirit than the conqueror of a city. So someone who is able to exercise restraint is considered more mighty than the mightiest conqueror, someone who is able to conquer an entire city. Well, why do you think that is? Why is someone who's able to conquer their anger a greater conqueror than someone who can physically conquer an entire city? Any thoughts? Open the floor here.
It's harder.
It's harder. Why? I agree. Why is it harder?
It's easy to go out and attack. Like, it's easy just to react and do whatever, but to not react, or to react by not reacting kind of thing, and just to hold it in and to contemplate is, like, to take that second is way harder.
It is, 100%. And the reason for that is controlling our anger is so contrary to what comes naturally to us as human beings. We mentioned before, we are wired to react spontaneously. We are definitely not wired to automatically stop and think. A conqueror of a city is born to conquer. He's good at conquering. Why is he conquering a city? Why was that person chosen to be the general of the army? Because he's good at what he does. He's a born leader. He's a born fighter. So how could you compare someone who's good at conquering to us human beings who find it so hard to conquer our impulses, or we're not at all born to conquer our impulses and doesn't come at all naturally to us? We are not good at that. So of course we're greater when we conquer our impulses versus someone who is conquering a city who is actually good at that. And not only that, someone who conquers a city, conquered a city, he's done. Victory, yay, did it. Everyone's so happy, carried up high, wins medals. Whereas in the human struggle of conquering our anger, it's day in, day out. It never ends. We do it once, we have to do it again and again and again. It's a lifelong struggle. You can't compare. And that's why the Mishnah Avot brings this quote from Proverbs, that he who conquers his spirit is greater than he who conquers a city. Now, to practice restraint, to refrain from acting, there are 2 tips to make it easier. Number 1 is, next time you feel that you're getting angry, identify the signals. Identify how your body starts to react when you get angry. Your heart beats faster, your chest closes up, you might be breathing harder, red in the face. Those are all signals that you're about to experience an amygdala hijack. And at that point, it's good to pause. So identifying your personal signs of when you're about to lose it is a big, big help in exercising restraint. So if you don't know when you're about to lose it, you'll lose it before you know it, and there goes the restraint. That's number 1. Number 2, once you have identified the signs and you know you were about to lose it, take a break. Leave the situation. Actually, if you look at figure 2.1, you should have it in the student textbook. There's a list of ideas there of suggestions of things to do to calm down, to take a breather before reacting. So take a minute, look at the list, see if anything there speaks to you. You might have your own technique for calming down. Some of the things listed, for those of you that don't have student textbooks, go for a walk, listen to some piece of music that calms you or makes you happy, talk to a friend, practice some breathing techniques, change your posture. You know, when you're angry, you tend to be hunched over, tense. Relax your shoulders, don't cross your arms, that might help. Change your thoughts. Instead of thinking, I can't deal with this, I could deal with this, I will deal with it in 10 minutes or whenever I'm calm. Those are all different techniques that could be done. So number 1, identify the signs. Number 2, take a break from the situation. Then plan your reaction. That's restraints. That's the first tool. And quite possibly, looking at the story of King David, that was the first thing King David did, was he took a deep breath. He didn't react spontaneously. Step number 2, consider another perspective. Now, considering another perspective is not only dealing with your reaction, but this time we're actually dealing with the anger, how to calm down the anger. Have any of you ever read the poem The Cookie Thief? It's one of the Chicken Soup for the Soul's books. Okay, so it's a great example. In short, and it's actually in your textbook if you want to take a look at it longer, But in short, there was a woman about to take a flight, and she had some time before her flight was due to leave. So she went to the little shop in the airport, and she bought a book, and she bought a bag of cookies, and she makes herself comfortable in the airport lounge until her flight's called. She takes out her book, she opens her package of cookies, and she's all set. Before she knows it, the guy sitting next to her is sticking his hand in her bag of cookies and taking out a cookie. She gives him a look. It's a little bit rude, but she doesn't say anything. She doesn't mind sharing, really. You know, she's not going to be the mean one here. So she gives him a look, and she takes another cookie. A minute later, he takes another cookie. She gives him another look. She takes it, and this continues. And meanwhile, she's getting more and more annoyed. What chutzpah? What does this guy think? It's her cookies. I mean, he doesn't mind to share, but you could at least ask. You know, you don't just stick your hand in someone else's bag of cookies. Anyhow, before long, they were down to the last cookie, and the man reaches in, and he breaks it in half, and he offers her a half, and that was the last straw for her. That's just the ultimate chutzpah. She just couldn't take it anymore, and by then her flight was called, and she stomped off in a rage to her flight. When she's on the plane, she sits down, and she reaches for her book, which she's in the middle of, and next to her book in her flight bag, what does she find?
The man.
A whole
cookies.
unopened bag of
bag
cookies, and she realized that was his cookies. She was the cookie thief. And he was so graciously sharing with her. So, yes, we tend to look at life through our own subjective lenses. And it's important to sometimes try and look at events through somebody else's lenses and be a little bit more objective. Because our way of looking at things is not always the correct way. And that's why, back to Mishnah Avot, we are told there, Ve'al tadin et chavercha ad shetagiya lemkomo. Do not judge your friend until you have reached her place. Or as the common English expression is, until you have been in her shoes. Because you don't know what it looks like from her place. It's very hard to judge. In fact, Stephen Covey, the author of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he tells a story. It's a true story that really happened to him. He's once riding the subway at night in New York, and there was this man with a bunch of boys, his sons, who were really rowdy. The boys were all over the place. They were climbing and jumping and really disruptive and bothering the other passengers on the subway. And Stephen Covey, he's watching this, and he's wondering, how the father control his kids? I mean, it's not appropriate. There's other people there. They're in public. You know, okay, yes, kids misbehave, but at least discipline them. Do something about it. The father was just not reacting. So at one point, he felt he should say something. So he went up to the father and he said, is there anything you can do to control your boys a little bit? They're kind of disruptive. The father said, well, listen, we're actually on the way back from their mother's funeral, and they don't know how to deal with it, and neither do I. And that's the situation. So he realizes, we don't always have all the information we need to judge. You never know the other side. And let's use this example. We have Miss Supervisor. Miss Supervisor is given a project deadline. By a certain date, she needs to gather a certain amount of material from people that work, her employees that work under her, and report to her boss. The deadline is fast approaching. It's approaching the next day, and there's one employee who did not turn in her report. And Miss Supervisor is fuming, because it's going to be on her head, right? She has this deadline to report to her boss, and because she is missing this employee's report, she is going to get into trouble, and it's just not fair, so she is fuming. But then, let's say she takes a moment to consider. Take a pause. Consider another perspective. Maybe this employee has a huge workload right now and really didn't have time to get to it. Maybe this employee did finish the report, gave it to the secretary, and the secretary was negligent with it and never gave it in. Maybe the employee never even got the instructions to give in this report. Maybe she never even heard of this deadline. It's very possible that Miss Supervisor is missing some critical information, and she doesn't really have a right to be fuming at Miss Employee. Or another way that Miss Supervisor can consider the situation is maybe Miss Supervisor had a bad day. Maybe her anger, her reaction, is totally disproportionate to Miss Employee's crime, so to speak. Miss Employee didn't hand in her report. Okay, it's annoying, but does it really deserve that anger? Maybe the anger is coming from something else. Maybe the anger is being fueled, is colored by some frustrations that are going on in Miss Supervisor's life. Maybe she had a hard commute to work. Maybe she forgot her lunch at home. Maybe she didn't do well on a different project, so she's taking out her anger on Miss Employee. So when you find yourself in a frustrating situation, a situation where you feel like you're getting angry, number one, consider, am I missing some information here? And number two, consider, are my personal experiences coloring my reaction? Okay, so that's step number two. Consider another perspective. And going back to King David, it's likely what happened. King David is listening to all this cursing, but he stops to think, said, 1 second. Maybe I'm missing some information here. Maybe. Could be. Or maybe because I'm in such a downtrodden state right now, I'm more emotional, and I'm going to react inappropriately because of my emotional state right now. Could be. He employed step number two. But what if you considered another perspective? And you are not missing information. And your anger is only a result of this perpetrator, of this person who's making you angry. It's not colored by your experiences, so then what? So text 10a tells us that if one becomes angry, it's as if one has served idols. Now, this is not just telling us that getting angry is so bad, it's as bad as if you served idols. There's much more to this. What is the Torah telling us? So again, we have a quote from Tanya, from the Alter Rebbe. Text 10b. When one grows angry, his faith departs. If he would believe that whatever happened to him was orchestrated by God, he would not become angry at all. True, he is suffering from the curses, blows, or damage to his property being inflicted by a human being who possesses freedom of choice. That person is therefore guilty by the laws of man and the laws of heaven for the evil he has chosen to inflict. Nevertheless, as far as the victim is concerned, this incident was already decreed in heaven, and God has many agents. So what does it mean to serve idols? Serving idols means you're ascribing power to a being other than God. You're saying God doesn't run everything in the world. I believe in this idol, God forbid, and this idol is running the world. That's what idol worship is. What is anger? Getting angry at someone is giving power to that person. Is saying, this person is determining what's happening in my life. This person is determining my reactions. This person is determining what I'm going to make of this situation. That's what it means when I'm getting angry at that person, when I'm blaming this perpetrator for what happened to me. Instead, let me remember that everything that happens in this world is orchestrated by God. God plans everything. So if this frustrating situation happened to me, I'm not going to blame the perpetrator. I'm going to look at it as something that God sent to me, and there's a message in there for me. Now, this doesn't mean that perpetrators let off the hook. No, everyone has free choice. And like the Alter Rebbe says, God has many agents. This guy didn't have to be the one to cause this frustrating situation for me. He or she chose to. That's their problem. They deserve whatever they deserve for that. But as far as I'm concerned, why am I giving power to this perpetrator? Why am I getting angry, directing my anger to this perpetrator? Let me look at it as a message from God. That is my faith. My faith is that everything comes from God, and if God gave me the situation, there's something for me to learn from it. So let me ask you, why would God cause somebody frustration? Why would God put someone in a situation that might get them angry? It might really be challenging.
Refinement.
To refine, good, to
It's
develop
part of
personality.
Our will, the freedom, the free will, right? This is where he kind of tests us to always get back to him instead of, we always have all our lives this free will. We supposedly always should choose God and his way.
Right,
So-
but is there something that we can learn from it? That's the question. And this is where we come to seek purpose and opportunity. That a frustrating situation is not something we survive. It's something that should cause us to thrive. So whether it's to
Elevating.
learn something for the future, maybe this situation will teach me sensitivity, so if it ever happens to a friend of mine, I can empathize. Maybe it's to teach me something that happened in my past. Remember, you did this to somebody, now you learned how it feels. Don't try it again. Or maybe, the crowded waiting room when I have to run and pick up my kids from school, maybe it's to teach me patience. Or maybe the betrayal of my friend is to teach me loyalty. There's always a message there for us to learn. All we have to do is open our eyes to see that.
On the other side, again, also I think it's like it's easy to judge people, but if God forbid you get in this situation,
That's the
and
consider
then,
another perspective.
yeah, so this way you can, this way maybe God give somebody like
Right.
you have
For
to
the
go
future.
through this
Exactly.
for the future. So.
Exactly. And this is exactly what happened with King David. There's a very interesting text from the Zohar explaining this incident with King David and Shimi ben Gera. And the Zohar says as follows, very, very interesting. The insulting behavior of Shimi ben Gera towards David was worse than anything he had hitherto experienced. Yet David did not answer him a word, accepting the humiliation as deserved. His sins, meaning King David's sins, were therefore forgiven. It is fitting to consider why Shimi, who was a scholar and a wise man, behaved to David as he did. The truth is that the insults and curses that he uttered were not from his own initiative.
From God.
God planted them in his heart for David's benefit, so that David would repent with a perfect repentance, with a broken heart and with many tears. David therefore said, the Lord has surely said to him, curse David, which is clearly written in the Bible. That was David's response to his men, that the Lord had told Shimi, curse David. David knew that the cursing and words of insult were inspired from above. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense, right? Why was this prominent citizen from a royal family behaving like that, insulting him, throwing rocks, putting him down?
He was
David
the
knew
messenger to.
if he's doing this, which is so out of character, which is so unexpected, it must be a message from God. And so instead of reacting with anger, which is such a human thing to do, and most of us probably would have done that 10 times over, I know I would have, instead of acting with anger, though, King David recognized this is an opportunity to grow, an opportunity for growth. And he used that opportunity to repent, and he was forgiven. Now, obviously, to incorporate this into our own lives requires a tremendous amount of faith, because we're talking about such a strong faith that no matter what happens, we trust that it's from God, and we accept it with love, and we look at it as an opportunity for growth. That's an amazing way to live. But it's not easy. Where do we get such a faith from? And to answer that, we can conclude with another biblical paradigm. The story of an amazing woman whose name is Hannah. Hannah, the mother of Samuel the prophet, who many years later was the one who anointed King David as king of Israel. For many, many years, Hannah was childless. And that's pain enough. But if besides for that pain, she had to suffer an additional pain, additional frustration, her husband Elkanah had another wife, Peninnah, and Peninnah had children. And Peninnah made it her mission to ridicule Hannah for not having children. She tortured her. At every opportunity, she reminded Hannah she had children and Hannah did not have children. And you can imagine the frustration of Hannah. Of course she wants children. It's her biggest dream. Why does she need to have it rubbed in her face over and over and over again by her rival, no less, that she doesn't have children? Imagine the frustration that must have been building up in her, the hates that she must have been feeling, the anger. What was her reaction? She went to the Mishkan, which was the portable temples before the permanent temple was built. It was the Mishkan. She went there to pray. That was her reaction. So, of course, on one hand, she was praying for a child. Right? That was what her prayer was about. And it was a very pivotal prayer, actually, in Jewish history. And you learn a lot about prayer from that specific prayer. That's a different class. But not only was she praying for a child, she was also praying for the strength to come out of this challenging situation as a stronger woman. She was praying to reinforce her belief that everything comes from God, to remind herself of her belief in God, that even this tough situation, this anger that she was trying to battle, this frustration of not having a child and being teased about it, that also comes from God. Prayer helped her refocus on where everything really comes from. And it's a very important lesson for us as well. A very good tool to reinforce our belief and to try to live with this belief that everything comes from God, no matter how challenging. A very good tool for that is prayer. That we turn to God and, number one, we ask God to help us appreciate the situation for what it is and help us grow from the situation. And number two, it reminds us, we're praying to God, it reminds us that God is in charge of everything. And the more often we pray, the more often we have that reminder. And the more often we have that reminder, the easier it is when a situation does come up that makes me angry, I can remember, oh, God sent this, what can I learn from it? Welcome, ladies, to the second lesson of the Rosh Chodesh Society, the series It's About Time. So we are now in the Hebrew month of Tevet, and as we mentioned last class, the way this series works is we are associating a human experience, a characteristic, or an emotion with every Jewish month of the year. So last month was Kislev, and we spoke about sleep. This month, Tevet, is associated in the book Sefer Yetzirah, Kabbalistic work. Sefer Yetzirah is associated with the very human characteristic of anger. Sarah, feel free to pull up and share, make yourself comfortable. Sorry? Sefer Yetzirah. Frustrated with you, right? Get upset. I should let out my frustration by making a handkerchief.
What is it? Sorry, I don't know
A
what
handkerchief?
it means in English yet.
A handkerchief, anyone knows it? Thank you.
Thanks.
So she said, and that's exactly what I did. Every time I got upset with you, Sam, I made a handkerchief and I put it in the box. So Sam is so touched. She said, wow, and I can't believe it. In all our 60 years of marriage, you were only upset at me twice? But what about the money? So Edna says, no, Sam. The $82,000 is the money I made from selling all the handkerchiefs that I made. These are only two that are left. So, talking about anger management. I guess Edna had a good technique. But the point is, we all experience anger. We all, the Book of Formation in English. So what we will discuss today, the class is titled Emotional Mastery. We will discuss how to manage anger, something that I think is relevant to every human being. So Edna and Sam were married for a good 60 years. And ever since Edna was a newlywed, she had this box on her closet shelf. And it was kind of like a secret box, because right after their marriage, she told Sam, in no uncertain terms, Sam, you are never to take down this box, and you are never to examine the contents of this box. And Sam respected that. You know, he was somewhat curious, but he respected her wishes, and as the years went by, he actually pretty much forgot about this box that remained sitting in Edna's closet. Well, 60 years later, they're both getting old, Edna's not so well, and Sam is beginning to put their affairs in order. And as he's looking through papers, he comes across this box, and he remembers, oh, this is Edna's secret box. But he thinks maybe now it's time to take a look. Edna's not well. Maybe there's something important some information that they need at this time in their lives. So he takes down the box, looks inside. What does he find? He finds 2 handkerchiefs and $82,000. He has no idea what this is supposed to mean. Where did all that money come from? So he went to ask Edna about it. And he said, listen, Edna, I confess, I looked in your secret box. I really couldn't help myself anymore. I'm sorry, but I must ask you, what is the meaning of the contents of that box? What are those 2 handkerchiefs and what is all that money? $82,000. So Edna said, well, Sam, when I got married, my mother gave me a marriage tip. She told me that any time I get frustrated, it's a very human emotion. And what we want to try to discover today through the class is how to manage it. Some techniques, some tools that the Torah has for us. There's a legend about Maimonides, otherwise known as the Rambam, Rosh ben Maimon. He's a 12th century scholar. And the Rambam was a prominent doctor. And in fact, he was a doctor for the Sultan. He worked in the Sultan's palace. And there was a debate at the time between the Rambam and various advisors of the Sultan whether an animal's instinct or base nature can be refined to the point of an animal actually able to behave kind of like a human. And the advisors were certain that could be done, whereas the Rambam disagreed. He said, an animal's an animal. Cannot really train an animal to change and become human-like.